Chapter 609 Zombies from Above. The mountain zombie took a step forward. Its movement was fairly slow, yet each step it took brought it much closer to the city. The head in the rain was moving closer. Somehow, the creature had already advanced over 10 kilometers. If there was anything providing some relief to the humans, it would be the discovery that the creature halted its movement for some reason around 10 kilometers away from the walls. A fat corpse official, looking like a lump of flesh, stood close to the creature's feet. Its size was like a hill, yet it only reached to just below the mountain zombie's knees. The flesh-mound corpse official had a giant mouth. It opened its mouth and swallowed the surrounding skeletons, zombies, and phantoms inside. It managed to hold more than 1,000 undead. Mofan did not dare to watch any further upon seeing this. Even though he was clueless about why the corpse official was eating the undead, there was no time for him to think about it. He had to find Lu Ru, Zhang Xiaohou, and the others as soon as possible, and retreat to the inner walls together. Mofan, what should we do now? Zhou Ming glanced at Mofan with a hint of panic. Come with me, said Mofan sternly. I must go to Bo City Street. I don't want to be involved in the same thing twice, Mu Bai said in a deep voice. Yeah, Mofan, we can't leave them behind, said Zhou Ming. Let's head to Bo City Street first, Mofan nodded. As Mu Bai had stated, the people of Bo City had already gone through a similar disaster once. They had barely survived the first time. It would be too cruel if they died in this one. Mofan knew he could only bring a limited number of people along. However, since Zhang Xiaohou and Lu Ru were going in the same direction too, he could not leave them behind. Count me in, Shorty said to Mofan, slowly getting to his feet. Mofan glanced at Shorty, who was still overwhelmed with grief, and nodded. It seemed like he had thought it through. The dead could not be resurrected. It was important to look after himself in chaos like this, before he had the ability to look after others. Then let's hurry up. A bunch of undead that was roaming close to the walls has already invaded the city. The walls were heavily damaged. More undead are going to break through. Mu Bai, do you have any relatives in City North? Said Zhou Ming. Only my uncle, but I believe he's quite close to the inner walls. He mentioned that he was heading into the inner walls to attend to some business, said Mu Bai. That's good to know. To Bo City Street. Let's hope they are not too scattered across the place. Bo City Street is a fair distance away from the inner walls. With how the traffic is tied up now, they won't be able to reach the inner walls safely, the worried Zhou Ming told him. Transportation was completely at a standstill. Even magicians were forced to travel on foot. Even with wind magicians, everyone was still moving slowly. Meanwhile, the undead that had invaded the city were chasing after them at full speed. These bloodthirsty creatures would simply chase after anything alive and tear them apart. Fresh blood mixed with rain soon dyed the area close to the beleaguered walls red. Several teams of magicians were evacuating the civilians, yet regardless of how hard they were blasting the undead with magic, the undead were rushing into the city through the gap faster than they were dying. The battle mages were gradually losing ground. Although it did help slow down the invasion, Mofan was well aware that those fighting could at most buy a little time for the civilians. When the Nether Bone Ruler's army of skeletons or the mountain zombies' tide of zombies arrived, every magician would be torn into pieces. Mofan, Zhou Ming, Mu Bai, and Shorty hurried over to Bo City Street. Everyone in the group was an intermediate magician, thus they were a lot fitter than the commoners. Since the streets were stuffed full of cars and fleeing crowds, the roofs became their path instead. The densely packed buildings allowed them to run along the walls and travel across rooftops. Mofan, isn't your energy fully recovered yet? I've got some serums here that will help your recovery. Mu Bai took out some serums he had brought along and handed them to Mofan. Thanks a lot. Mofan was in dire need of energy. As a magician with 4 elements, he had twice the amount of energy compared to an ordinary magician, so it was rare for him to deplete his energy. Luckily, he had retreated to the walls with Yao Nan earlier, allowing him to rest up for a little bit. Otherwise, his energy would be pretty much empty now. He would most likely die to the undead, let alone be able to save others. As they passed by the hospital that was bulldozed to the ground, Mo Fan purposely glanced at Shorty. Shorty did not hesitate at all. It was clear that he had experienced situations of life and death too often. He had only lost his mind just then because it was someone extremely important to him. There was nothing Shorty could do after a person's death. Since he was still alive, he had to try his best to stay that way. At our speed, we should be able to retreat to the inner walls before this whole place is overrun by the undead, said Shorty. Shorty was more familiar with the ancient capital than anyone else there. With him leading the way, the group would reach Bow City Street in the shortest time, and could escort the people of Bow City to the safe zone. That's a relief. I feel sorry for the people that live close to the outer walls. Zhou Ming was full of sorrow as she witnessed the death of countless innocent people. It was likely that in less than an hour after the purple alert was sounded, the casualties close to the outer walls had already surpassed the total casualties of the calamity of Bow City. On top of that, the number was increasing rapidly as they spoke. What's that thing in the sky? Is that a lump of meat? How is it as huge as a building? It has eyes, oh my, it looks so terrifying. The crowd on the streets cried in panic, prompting the others to raise their heads and stare at the giant object sweeping past in the sky above the buildings. Mo Fan also raised his head and discovered the giant lump of flesh just as it crashed onto the intersection not far away, like a meaty meteorite. The intersection was full of vehicles, but when the lump of flesh landed on the ground, it occupied the entire intersection, smashing the surrounding buildings into pieces with the impact. Mo Fan stared at the giant mound of flesh in astonishment. The thing looked very familiar to him. Wasn't it the Flesh Mound Corpse official that ate more than 1,000 undead close to the mountain zombies' feet from before? The Flesh Mound Corpse official had dropped out of the sky. Did that mean the mountain zombie had tossed it into the city? That creature was more than 10 kilometers away. As Mo Fan watched stunned with wide eyes, a bad feeling crossed his heart. As he thought, the Flesh Mound Corpse general that he was staring at suddenly opened its mouth, and the countless skeletons, zombies, and phantoms it had eaten before burst out from its stomach like a surging tide. The streets promptly filled with screams. The crowd that had finally started to retreat in order began to panic again, trampling, shoving, and pushing one another. Mo Fan was aghast. He looked up into the sky. The same kinds of giant flesh mound corpse generals were hurtling in from the distance and crashing into the city randomly, like great bombs of flesh. Mo Fan felt his scalp going numb. No one expected that the mountain zombie would simply toss these flesh mound corpse generals into the city, transporting thousands of undead onto the streets. It was going to deal a deadly blow to the civilians who were fleeing for their lives. Chapter 610 Imperial Magicians. The streets ahead are filled with undead. What's going on? Yelled Mu Bai. The remaining walls should be able to hold the undead army off for some time. Yet why were the streets already filled with so many phantoms, zombies, and skeletons? They were simply chasing and tearing away at any human they stumbled into. The streets were immediately covered in corpses. Run, quick, or else the corpse official will be targeting us. Shorty yelled at the other three. As he shouted, the eyes of the Flesh Mound Corpse official, which had just disgorged over 1,000 undead, slowly moved in their direction. It was clear that the creature was able to specifically detect the presence of magicians. The group knew that they stood no chance against a commander-level undead with their current strength. They were left with no choice but to flee for their lives. If the corpse official decided to hunt them down, it would be too late for them to run away. The four immediately headed for the alleyway nearby, using the buildings for cover. Above them, only a tiny glimpse of the sky could be seen in the tiny alleyway. They could still catch a glimpse of the Flesh Mound Corpse officials hurtling across the rainy sky, being thrown deeper into the city. If each of the Flesh Mound Corpse officials were able to carry over 1,000 undead inside them, in just a few minutes, the undead would simply fill every corner of the city. The scene was absolutely terrifying. Even magicians had to flee like mice. It was not an exaggeration to describe the ancient capital as on the verge of being overrun. The rain continued to fall, but the giant golden barrier looming over the inner city provided no resistance to the raindrops. It continued to fall on the streets, covering the historical buildings in the ancient capital. A bell tower stood at the heart of the city. A golden beam of light was rising off it into the sky, serving as the main pillar of the golden barrier, opening up like an umbrella above. The arc-shaped light fell right on the perimeter of the inner walls. In addition to that, the four corners of the walls also had light formations supporting it. The entrance to the inner city was wide open. A huge crowd was pushing their way through the entrance. The only reason they were able to escape was because they were not far from the inner walls when the purple alert was sounded. The inner walls were not huge, but they were protected by the magic barrier. The seemingly ordinary walls were fairly sturdy. Even commander-level creatures would have a hard time knocking them down. At the north entrance of the inner walls, the Yuan Gate that was normally not open to the public was currently occupied by many magicians. The authorities standing on the observation corridor above the Yuan Gate were frowning while they waited for the Magic Association to make a decision. Below the tower, loud curses were rising. Even the most unpleasant words were being shouted now. When the terrified crowd saw the people standing in the tower on standby, they simply assumed the authorities had no intention of eliminating the undead invading the city. They felt that these magicians were not worthy of respect. They were only a bunch of cold-blooded animals concerned about looking after themselves. "Captain, the people are just going to be more disappointed if we wait any longer," blurted out a young imperial magician in panic. Their curses were extremely unpleasant to the ears, leaving the magician who was not as focused as the others flushed red. Weren't magicians supposed to step forward at times like this, especially the imperial magicians, referred to as the honorable magicians by the people of the ancient capital? The imperial magicians were the elite members from the Magic Association, comparable to the magicians of the Magic Palace. Every single imperial magician was an elite specifically chosen from different places. Their squad was also known as the Shield of the City. However, these imperial magicians were ordered to stand here at the inner walls instead. They could not do anything apart from watching the city fall to massive destruction, while the undead were devouring the outer walls like a black tide, covering the streets, the buildings, the open areas, and the crowd. "Zuo Feng, stay calm," snapped another imperial magician. "But aren't you seeing this too? If we continue to hide here instead of driving the undead out of the city, we are not worthy to be called imperial magicians," yelled Zuo Feng in agitation. The purple and gold-robed captain of the imperial magicians simply cast a cold glance at the man called Zuo Feng without saying a word. A messenger rushed up to the magicians quickly and blurted out a few words into the ears of the captain. The captain raised his head. His sharp eyes glanced at the flesh-mound corpse officials scattered across the streets, the parks, the shopping malls, and the buildings coldly. "All imperial magicians, listen up," the captain suddenly spoke up, his voice ringing out as firmly as the sound of iron being forged. At that instant, the magicians in purple robes came to attention. Even the cold raindrops fallen from the sky were turning into ice before their auras. Only advanced magicians were allowed to join the imperial magicians. How terrifying was the aura produced when a bunch of advanced magicians focused. "Eliminate the flesh-mound corpse officials," the captain ordered loudly. As soon as the command was given, it turned out that a third of the imperial magicians had the ability to fly. They either drew star constellation to summon wind wings, or activated their wing magical equipment and soared into the sky. The well-trained magicians instantly formed into groups of 3 and flew straight for the flesh-mound corpse officials. Corpse officials were creatures that normally required a group of advanced magicians to eliminate them, yet these imperial magicians in purple robes only split into groups of 3. They were utterly fearless facing the corpse officials that continued to fall from the sky. An advanced magician would either possess the ability to fly or have mounts to travel around. Those who were unable to fly were not slow, either. They were traveling across the roofs and the tall buildings, flying across the skies above the crowd. As soon as the imperial magicians moved out, a loud cheer immediately arose. The purple-robed advanced magicians flew into the distance and soon arrived in all corners of the huge city. The captain of the Imperial Magicians stayed on the tower. His gaze never left the scene before him. The messenger from before was still standing beside him. He could not help but ask, "Lu Huan, if I'm not mistaken, your family should be in City South." Captain Lu Huan nodded. "Any news?" asked the messenger. Lu Huan shook his head. The messenger fell silent. He glanced at Lu Huan's determined face, which was still filled with worry. Most of the time, those in crucial positions were the ones without the freedom to act independently. As the strongest super magician at an Yuan gate, his job was to kill the bone creature in the sky when it approached. Apart from that, he was not allowed to go anywhere or do anything. He had seen lots of fresh blood being shed, and the piles of bodies on the ground. As a super magician, he could have saved them easily with a super spell, yet he could not do it. Expending his energy might save those people's lives, but it might also make him lose to the Nether Bone Ruler. Once he lost, it would no longer just be a group of people dying, but the whole city. Chapter 611 Demon of Disaster. "Damn it! How many of these filthy things are there?" cursed Shorty. The crowd on the intersecting streets in the city was in a great mess. Even the weakest zombie standing on the street would create a huge panic among the civilians. In addition to that, the fear was contagious, making it harder for the people to evacuate and retreat in good order. If the people were running for their lives on their own, it would make it harder for the magicians to look after them. In this situation, the only thing that the magicians could do was to eliminate the invaders. The streets, alleyways, and shops were overrun by the undead. The enormous mountain zombie had tossed tens of thousands of zombies to different places. Each of the corpse officials was transporting more than 1,000 undead with them. As the undead pursued the people and killed them on sight, life had suddenly become a race and a gamble. Those who were slower would be dragged away by the zombies, and nobody knew if a phantom, its mouth already filled with fresh blood, would be waiting for them at the next junction. Mo Fan, Zhou Ming, Mu Bai, and Shorty had passed several streets. Basically, they could see undead along all the wider streets. They would try their best to eliminate the undead when they could, yet their energy was limited. Most of the time, they had no choice but to avoid contact with the undead when they were preying on people in large numbers. It was tough and painful to make the decision. They felt sad and cruel abandoning the civilians, yet there was nothing they could do. In a war like this, everyone was a victim of the disaster. Not only were their lives cheap in the eyes of the undead creatures, even the other people could not help but feel the same way too. "Hurry up, we'll arrive at Bo City Street after crossing this flyover bridge." "I think this area is still safe from the undead," said Zhou Ming, pointing at a row of densely packed buildings. "If you headed here following the path you wanted to take initially, it would have taken you more than half an hour longer. Go, bring your people to safety while this place is not crawling with undead yet," said Shorty. Mu Bai led the way. He was about to use his magic boots to cross the unstable area quickly when Mo Fan stopped him. "Try not to use your equipment unless it's necessary, it might save your life." Mo Fan was more experienced than Mu Bai, after all. Mu Bai nodded. Even though he was quite worn out from all the running, he did not use his boots in the end. Suddenly, a loud crash came from the half-kilometer-long flyover bridge ahead of them. The four magicians looked up and discovered a phantom with sharp black wings was now standing on the bridge. Its figure was covered in gray fur. The creature had incredible strength, easily raising a sedan on the bridge with one hand. The loud crash was the sound produced when it threw the car to the ground. The black sedan was destroyed instantly, and even erupted in flames. "Help! Help! Help me!" A cry of agony came from a red vehicle. Mo Fan glanced ahead and saw the phantom with wings picking up another vehicle. Through the windshield, they could see a woman with disheveled hair poking her head out, her face pale as she screamed for help. Before anyone could react, the phantom tossed the vehicle over the side of the bridge, and it fell together with the scream of terror from the woman. "There's someone in the car." Zhou Ming was terrified. The place that the vehicle was falling to was less than 10 meters away from them. "Damn it, let's kill this asshole," cursed Mo Fan. In the nick of time, Mo Fan's figure sank into the shadows from the bridge overhead and quickly went inside the rapidly falling red car. Mo Fan, holy crap, is he trying to kill himself? Yelled Shorty. The car was falling from the bridge. It would only take less than 2 seconds for it to reach the ground. If Mo Fan snuck inside the vehicle with fleeing Shadow, wouldn't he be crushed to pieces together with the woman? Another loud crash took place. The new red sedan instantly turned into a pile of scrap as it landed on the ground. The parts scattered across the place, some even rolling to the feet of the 3 magicians. At the same time, a pool of black shadow swept past them and stopped under the overpass. The shadow became clearer. Mo Fan in his black shirt slowly walked out from it, holding a woman who had fallen unconscious in his arms. Impressive. Shorty gave Mo Fan a thumbs up. The falling car had its own shadow as it approached the ground, which Mo Fan relied on to quickly escape from the vehicle with fleeing Shadow before it slammed into the ground. Not only did he have to cast fleeing Shadow twice within seconds, the courage and agile thinking he displayed was not something that an ordinary magician had. You're able to draw a star orbit with a single thought now? As expected of the top student Mu Bai, he immediately determined Mo Fan's cultivation. Only by mastering the ability to draw a star orbit with a single thought would Mo Fan be able to finish casting a basic spell in an instant, allowing him to use fleeing Shadow consecutively. Let's talk about that later. We should kill this phantom first. Otherwise, many people will be killed by it, Mo Fan pointed upward. Mo Fan placed the woman under the bridge, and she regained consciousness in just a brief moment. As she was about to express her tearful gratitude, Mo Fan had already turned into a streak of shadow, making his way up the bridge. Follow me. Mu Bai quickly cast Ice Lock. The icy chains crossed paths with one another under his control, forming an ice ladder on the pillar of the bridge. Zhou Ming and Shorty followed Mu Bai up the ladder, going after Mo Fan who had reached the top of the bridge. That's a demon of disaster. It likes to hide in the dark like a bat, and flit in the air above its prey, leaving a huge hole in its target's head. In the next second, brain fluid mixed with blood jets out from the hole. Zhou Ming was an expert when it came to identifying demon creatures. She could easily identify any creature with a single glance. Don't scare me like that. Shorty was an experienced hunter, yet he had never heard of anything like that. Either way, just be careful of its index finger. It will suddenly extend forward like a shadow hook. Once it touches your head, you're dead. Even magic armor won't be able to protect you, warned Zhou Ming. Mo Fan heard Zhou Ming's advice, too. When he arrived on the bridge, he carefully studied the demon of disaster's hand, and noticed that the creature's hand had one finger which was very long and thin. It could indeed be described as a hook. You mentioned that it likes to hide in the dark. Does that mean it has the shadow element? Mo Fan frowned. He could vaguely sense a dark aura from the demon of disaster. Yeah, so your giant shadow spikes are useless against it. We have to trap it with Mu Bai's Ice Lock. By the way, this creature is an expert at running away, so we can't let it learn that we are able to kill it. Otherwise, it will just run away when it senses something isn't right, and will keep annoying us from above throughout our journey, explained Zhou Ming. Chapter 612 A Clean Kill. Creatures like this demon of disaster were definitely the deadliest at night. They would circle around in the sky, hiding in the dark, and then deal magicians a deadly blow. However, during the daytime, its movements were obviously greatly hindered. The cunning demon of disaster would immediately beat its wings to produce a black mist when it saw a group of magicians trying to flank it. The mist was similar to the advanced spell of Shadow Element, Nyx's regime, yet neither its effect nor coverage were comparable to Nyx's regime. It would want to create a space that was favorable for it to fight in, yet its tactic was simply useless when there was a light magician around. Brilliant light. Purify. Shorty was an experienced hunter. As soon as he saw the demon of disaster trying to stir up trouble, a milky white light blossomed on his palm. He tossed the light right into the center of the black mist. The golden light rays shining forth thoroughly purified the mist, which was similar to the gas produced from a car's exhaust. Even the stench was gone. Most importantly, they were able to see the creature clearly under the bright light. Ice Lock. Mu Bai cast his intermediate ice spell again. The frost surrounding him was clear and transparent, beautiful like crystal. It was obvious that the ice seed he had was not something ordinary, either. 4 long ice chains appeared simultaneously. Mu Bai controlled them to intertwine swiftly above the demon of disaster, forming a web of metallic chains the color of ice looming over it. The creature was just about to fly into the air to dodge the spells cast by the group when the ice lock pressed down on it heavily, dragging it back to the ground. The ice chains had the effect of ice spread. Once it made contact with its target's skin, the freezing frost would swiftly spread across and penetrate the target's body. On top of that, it seemed like Mu Bai's ice seed had further increased the effect. The just-wrapped demon of disaster was immediately covered in frost by the chains, thoroughly freezing its 2 arms. It can no longer use fleeing shadow or fly. It won't pose any threat to us anymore. Zhou Ming was overjoyed when she saw Shorty and Mu Bai's professionalism. They immediately sealed off the demon of disaster's annoying capabilities. Teaming up with reliable people felt totally different. If they simply gave the demon of disaster time to produce the mist or fly into the sky, it would be troublesome to kill it. Mo Fan, your turn, said Shorty. Mo Fan had already mastered the ability to draw a star orbit with a single thought. He no longer needed a long time to finish channeling an intermediate spell. Purple-black star orbits connected with one another smoothly, combining into a brilliant star pattern. The restless energy of lightning appeared. They could even feel the air being scorched by it. When Mo Fan fixed his gaze on the demon of disaster, a shocking ray of lightning came down perfectly straight. It lit up the flyover bridge and landed accurately on the demon of disaster, right between its wings. Regardless of how overwhelming the demon of disaster's strength was, the brilliant light had blinded it, while the ice chain had sealed off its movements. It had completely turned into target practice for Mo Fan. The damage inflicted when all the lightning strikes of the spell Thunderbolt, wild strikes landed on the same target was absolutely terrifying. When the 3rd, 4th, and 5th purple-black lightning rays landed on the demon of disaster, its body sank into the ground as the impact simply blew a hole in the bridge. Its back was festered and scorched black. The creature was still alive, yet it had a hard time trying to rise to its feet. The space-trembling effect of Mo Fan's lightning had impaired its movement. Even though the undead could not feel any pain, the damage inflicted to their important body parts would still affect their ability to move. How violent! I've never seen anyone that can almost kill a warrior-level creature with a single intermediate spell. Shorty raised his thumb at Mo Fan. Mo Fan was a typical full DPS magician. During the group battles in Pearl Institute, whenever he was given a chance to attack, he would simply crush his opponents, and it was the same for warrior-level creatures. Any other group of intermediate magicians would have to work together to barely kill a warrior-level creature, yet someone like Mo Fan, whose lightning element had reached the 3rd level and was further strengthened by a soul seed, a single thunderbolt, wild strikes was equivalent to the damage output of a small team. Zhou Ming was not just standing there to leech XP, she quickly followed up with a fiery fist, groundbreak. The blossoming flames of death devoured the place where the demon of disaster was lying, blasting a huge hole into the overpass. The flames burned fiercely, burning the demon of disaster's wings into ashes. Its figure, burning in the flames, struggled wildly, shoving the vehicles nearby away like toys while uttering a piercing screech. Still trying to run away. Mu Bai controlled the ice chains to weave through the vehicles nimbly and wrapped around the demon of disaster's legs. As he raised his hand, the ice chains dragged the demon of disaster back with brute force. It was quickly turned into black charcoal. Zhou Ming's flames had an extended burn time, burning longer than normal fires. They simply burned the demon of disaster to ash. I'll be taking the undead crystal, that thing is quite useful. Shorty went up to the demon of disaster boldly when he confirmed that the creature was dead. As expected of an experienced hunter, the guy adeptly retrieved the undead crystal from the creature's corpse. The undead crystals of undead that were killed by lightning or fire would usually be in good condition. Undead crystals were basically magic ores which contained the energy accumulated by the undead after refining the presence of death for decades. The undead crystals of servant-class undead were basically useless, but those from warrior-level creatures were rather valuable. Take this, it can replenish your energy. It works with any element, and is more effective than serums. Shorty broke the undead crystal in half and handed one half to Mo-Fan. Mo-Fan's eyes flickered. Energy was his main concern for the time being, especially his summoning element. The nebula of his summoning element was a lot dimmer since both the Swift Star Wolf and Flame Bell had fought a long battle. He would become helpless soon if they kept stumbling into undead along the way. So this thing is actually quite useful. Mo-Fan placed the undead crystal on his palm. When he directed his will into it, a fresh source of energy flowed back into his body. Mo-Fan decisively inserted the energy into his summoning element's nebula. The energy of the summoning element was Little Flame Bell and Swift Star Wolf's energy intake. Both of them were resting up after they were worn out from the previous battle, yet Mo-Fan was unable to provide any energy to them. They were going to encounter more undead along the way. Without their assistance, Mo-Fan was not too convinced of the group's safety. There's a side effect though. When you consume it the first time in a day, it will replenish a quarter of your energy. The second time would only replenish an eighth of your energy, and the third time, the effect would reduce by half again. The energy you can recover from the fifth or sixth time is pretty much negligible, said Shorty. We're still a distance away from the inner walls. Let's try our best to conserve our energy, Mo-Fan said grimly to the others. Zhou Ming and Mu Bai nodded. They were well aware of how serious the situation was.